Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching The Wire Wrap. I'm Shravasti Dasgupta, and joining us today is Seema Chisti, editor at The Wire and transparency activist Anjali Bhardwaj, who you may know because of the recent case that her NGO lodged in the Supreme Court, after which we all got to know the data relating to the electoral bonds. Thank you so much for joining us on The Wire Wrap. So the second phase of the Lok Sabha elections is scheduled to take place on April 26th, when about 89 seats will be going to the polls across 21 states, and we will be discussing what's at stake over there and the issues that are coming up. But first off, let's talk about the fact that the Election Commission of India today has issued notices to the BJP and the Congress, but has not named either Narendra Modi or Rahul Gandhi in its notices, which is perhaps for the first time. Now, these notices have, of course, come on the back of very openly communal remarks that have been made by the Prime Minister and successively by Amit Shah, as well as the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, and the action has come after almost 3 days when the EC's silence has been questioned, and these notices today do not explicitly name Prime Minister Modi or any of these leaders in any way. Seema, coming to you on this, you've been covering elections for many years now, and the Election Commission as well. Is this the first time that notices have been sent in such a manner which does not really indict anyone? It's sent to the party president and not to and mentions star campaigners without really saying who it is, what is it for. That, I mean, there are parts of the speeches that have been attached in the releases of the Election Commission, but one could say that it's a very vague notice.
Yeah, not just vague. I think the Election Commission is actually charting different kinds of laws for itself. Like if you remember what happened in 2019, there were no notices given at all there were very objectionable speeches made by senior most leadership of the BJP, and thou shall not be named. It seems as if, so now at least we have some semblance of, we think we know who the star campaigners are, but who's the notice intended for? Is it for Hardik Patel, who's also a star campaigner in Gujarat? How are we to guess? So I think by doing this, by pretending, trying to be a kind of a moderator, trying to be a good referee, being forced to do that 3 days on, the Election Commission has really is not looking good and is not coming out of this smelling of roses. Because that's not the way you go to parties. This is being fought by 543, for 543 seats, is a parliamentary election. Why would you go to the party president and report like this so vaguely? So either the fear runs so deep. And I think this kind of brings us to how election commissioners are appointed. The person whom they are supposed to send this notice against is key amongst the three who has appointed these three commissioners. So how on earth are they expected to suddenly throw off the shackles of the whole appointments process and become neutral and objective? It's a sad day for India.
So, of course, we know that these election commissioners were appointed just some weeks before the elections officially kicked off. And Anjali, I want to get you in on this. The fact that the Election Commission silence has been questioned for a while now. And as Seema was mentioning, the whole appointment process was took place in a very dubious manner when the former election commissioner resigned without giving any stated reason, and then under pressure these three election commissioners were appointed, and now these very openly communal remarks that were made by the Prime Minister as well as other BJP leaders, and we did not hear a peep from the Election Commission despite almost 19,000 citizens writing to the Election Commission itself. So what does this tell us about the Election Commission of India at this moment as we go into the second phase of polling?
No, I think what is very clear is that for the past many years, this happened very much even in the 2019 elections, the role of the Election Commission of India has not been what we expect and what the Constitution expects it to be. Even in 2019, we saw how there was a lot of alacrity with which the Commission would react to any kind of complaints against opposition leaders, but against leaders of the ruling party, there was deafening silence, to the point that one of the commissioners, when he did dissent, he was not even allowed to record his dissent. Ashok Lavasa, and action was taken against even his family members, and he had to resign. So what we are seeing is a complete autonomy of the commission does not seem to be in place. And like Seema said, at the heart of some of this is how the people who are supposed to head these commissions are being appointed. There was a clear case in the Supreme Court after the 2019 elections where these concerns were brought up, and the Supreme Court ruled that it cannot be the government of the day, the ruling party, which goes and has a preponderance in appointing election commissioners, because they have to be free and fair in order to make sure that elections are conducted properly and there is public trust in the institution. But we did see how, despite the Supreme Court saying that the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition and the Chief Justice of India will be on this committee that will select the election commissioners, the government brought in a law to say that it will be the Prime Minister, one of the cabinet ministers, union ministers, and the Leader of Opposition. Even when these appointments that you're saying happened just a couple of weeks before these elections, the Leader of Opposition came out saying that I did not even know who were the shortlisted candidates.
Absurd.
So he said that when the meeting was to start, just 7-8 minutes before that, he was handed over the list of shortlisted candidates and 2 appointments were made. Now, this makes a mockery of the system, and what we are seeing subsequently just confirms people's suspicions that when a body is selected, when commissioners are selected by a selection committee which has a preponderance of the government, they're finding it very difficult to then go about their duties that are constitutionally mandated. I mean, really, it is sounding like he who must not be named. I mean, you have such a blatant speech being made by the Prime Minister, and so much pushing by citizens across the country. I mean, this should have been something that should have happened within hours. You know, we are not talking about a speech that happened in some remote area which took a very long time to be brought to the commission's notice. It was everywhere, and now we see this action which is so inadequate, which you know, I mean, has left everybody guessing as to who the star campaigners are. Like you said, some bits have been released, as you know, from his speech, but this is no way to take action. What we expect is clear, swift action from the Election Commission. Then second stage or phase of elections is upon us. I mean, this is really destroying the level playing field in so many ways.
No, and I also want to say that the other level of mockery is this equivalence. What is this about going after kind of all sides of the opposition and the ruling party? So there is this ambiguity about who's being, you know, Voldemort will not be named. And on the other side, there is this other opposition party which you roll in. So this actually reminds me of what big media does these days. That let's question the opposition. Oh, are there floods in the neighborhood? Let's go after the opposition. So I think all this reeks of how the fundamentals of what institutions are meant to do to keep a democracy alive, forget about making it thrive, are seriously at risk now.
In this connection, I just want to mention to our viewers there's a recent report by the News Minute which talks about what Seema was just mentioning, the fact that if you see the primetime news debates in our country, only about 55% are devoted to attacking the opposition, and 1 point something percent is devoted to issues of the common people, including jobs and education, which are actually issues that people are talking about on the ground. So whenever you go out and in this election season, you talk to people, what are the issues that they're facing, what are they going to vote on, the first thing that they say is that it's unemployment and it's education and it's jobs everywhere. But we don't see any mention of that, neither in campaign speeches nor in primetime news debates. But since we are talking about the role of the Election Commission, also in the Supreme Court, yesterday the Supreme Court has reserved its judgment in the case in which petitioners sought 100% verification of the VVPATs, and it has said that no candidate has yet pointed to a mismatch between the votes polled on the EVMs and the slips printed by the VVPATs, and therefore it cannot issue directions on the basis of mere suspicion. But interestingly, it has also said that the source code for the EVMs should be kept confidential lest it is misused. Anjali, you want to tell us about what this really means?
Well, there has been a very long campaign where people who are concerned about the manner in which EVMs, VVPATs have been functioning, have really sort of, been bringing to the fore the kinds of issues that they believe need to be addressed. The Supreme Court has been approached repeatedly. In this particular case also, the court was approached. The court has been asked to do 100% counting of the VVPAT slips, which I think is really not a difficult task in a democracy our size, and it is so very crucial. Now, if we even look at the international experience, the German Supreme Court has basically ruled against these EVMs and these kinds of machines because they've said that they don't comply with the basic democracy principles, the three principles of us being able to verify as voters whether our vote was cast as intended, whether it was recorded as it was cast, and whether it is being counted as it was recorded. Because what is happening in this is it's like a black hole where I press the button and then for a little while behind a dark glass, there is a light that lights up and I'm supposed to check whether it's the same symbol. And then I have no idea whether that slip dropped, it didn't, whether it was counted in the exact manner in which I pressed the button.
And within 7 seconds.
And this for people to do within 7 seconds. So what has been the simple demand is that when the EVM, and we are not even talking about, nobody's talking about going back to paper ballots. People have been saying that when I press the button, there is a VVPAT. It's in any case printing out a slip. It should be given to me as a voter, and I should be able to cast it in a chip-free box. That's the way in which I can actually verify whether the person that or the candidate that I voted for is the one that I'm putting the slip in for. And finally, I mean, how can we not count those slips? There's the excuse there, which the Election Commission and the government have been coming up with, is that it'll take too long to do it. I mean, look at how the elections have been spread out over months, literally. And how long can it possibly take? We used to have these big ballot papers, which used to be counted and results used to be very promptly announced. Now, even in the court, it's been clearly said that it'll take, if not a few hours, then maybe a few days, like 2-3 days for these slips to be counted. If it means that it will build public trust, and without which elections are meaningless, because you can't sort of, substitute public trust in the election process with anything else. So this has really been the prayer that, just give people the slip, let them cast it in a chip-free box, and just count all the slips. And it is even in the Election Commission's affidavit, they have said that there have been discrepancies. It's just that the manner in which some of these hearings have happened, even the responses that have come from the Election Commission, the kind of probing that the judges have had to do, it really doesn't look like there is any kind of political will to listen to people when they're saying that, look, it's all right, you're using EVM, VVPATs, but at least do this so that there is a basic minimum kind of trust that can be reposed in these machines.
Shravasti, here, I mean, just like to echo two things that you said, that, that you need to know, stand up and be counted. It's stuff of metaphors, which is what, excuse me, the whole process of elections is about.
Absolutely.
That each Indian stands up, who may be just be anybody, stands up and gets counted. You have to allow for that. Number two, the voters of India did not invent VVPAT. VVPAT is something that has been invented and foisted upon the system by these very institutions, which are now trying to gaslight the nation. You came up with a system which speaks of it as a voter verified trail, like it's a paper trail. Why will it not be authenticated and verified as per your system? So and it's almost here as if making people who ask for this appear like loonies. Whereas all they're saying is that you put a system in place, will you please establish a pattern for it? Would you make sure that a certain number, or even if it's compulsory for a certain number of polling booths to be randomly picked and counted to check it out, what is so wrong with that? So I find it quite absurd, and it's again a case of institutional kind of, just allowing them to completely, and of course institutions also doing themselves in, because they're all adults, they are bureaucrats, they swear by a code, I mean whatever the Hippocratic, I think, equivalent is for civil servants, they're standing up for the Constitution of India. And for them to behave in this pusillanimous way and say that it's a strong executive, so we can't do much, is really like cheating voters. You set up a system and then you don't do good by it. So I think...
And these are the very reasons for which across the world, we've seen that countries haven't adopted the EVMs and the equivalents of that, and courts like the German court have held them, have gotten done away with them.
So, an argument that is made in this regard is, of course, the fact that if we count VVPATs, that's a return to the paper ballot, as you were mentioning earlier, and that's not something that's desirable. That's what the Election Commission has said time and again. So, how do you see that? Is it, if we count all the VVPATs again, is that a return to the paper ballot? Just for the benefit of our viewers, if you want to weigh in on that.
Well, I mean, my point is that why did you install the VVPATs? If you install the VVPATs, this is something the system brought up. The voters did not dream it up. You put it in with a way to give me a procedure which, even if you don't count all, you count, say, 80%. Do you count on sensitive booths? Do you count on a random? And a lot of these kind of ideas were played around with before the 2019 elections. And I think the petitions were then fast forward, hustled without arriving at a conclusion. And that has just been allowed to just linger and just hang for 5 years. And again, just at peak election time, this is being debated again. Had they thought about it, and if there's a fear that this is, ballot box by stealth, I see nothing wrong in going to paper, because this whole technology, dashboard, let's just jazz everybody by saying that you press a button and magic starts happening. If that also goes back, I see papers very sophisticated, clear, transparent and clean. But anyway, if you want to stick to machines also, because you have a VVPAT in place, you should at least have a system of, say, 20% would be counted, 10% is going to be counted. And second, what's this time thing? As Anjali said, we have a record election in the worst heat wave that India has faced for years. Whereas with much less technology, in 2004, the same 543 seats went to polls in just 20 days. So, I don't think there are sticklers for time and wanting to do it so quickly. In fact, the Election Commission took ages to even tell the people what the percentage of votes polled were for the first phase. So I don't think they're particularly, Usain Bolting on this. They're not necessarily racing to the end of the race.
And of course, a lot of questions being raised on the efficacy of these EVMs, whether they are being manipulated or not. The opposition parties, the opposition parties
no
have.
System is perfect. For us to be told that there's no way to hack this machine, I mean, that itself is an absurd statement. And now this time, when the hearing was happening, it was clearly established that these machines are being linked finally to the internet. So it's nothing, no machine is completely something that can't be hacked. In a situation like that, why can't there be basic systems that are put in place that would just ensure that there isn't that scope for hacking, the scope for subverting our votes and entire elections in that sense? And like Seema said, even earlier when this matter was taken up in court, finally now we have 2% cases in which the VVPAT slips are counted. All that people are saying is counted for 100%. So if there isn't a match between the number of people who went to the booth to count and the VVPAT slips, it will be something that will become absolutely clear. Also, this entire thing of saying that we are moving away from paper ballots. There was all this thing about saying that when people put a mark, we don't know exactly where it was put. There is ballot stuffing, there is booth capturing, etc. If we want this system also to function properly without the same kind of problems coming in, then you just need to put in proper systems to verify, proper systems, so that all of us as voters are assured that the voting is happening in a manner which is in a manner that it should.
Yeah, and just to build on that, in the first phase, we've seen that in Tripura, if I'm not mistaken, more than 100% of votes have been polled. So how is that happening, and what are the ways that the process can be made more transparent? These are questions that voters also need to be asking their representatives and themselves before they go to cast their vote. But because we have Anjali with us today, we've also want to talk about the fact that another petition has been filed by you and Common Cause in the Supreme Court about the electoral bonds. Now, of course, electoral bonds was a huge issue 2 months back. Now, in the campaign trail, all seems to have been forgotten. No political parties talking about it. Of course, the BJP, the Prime Minister himself in certain interviews has said that his government brought in the electoral bonds and therefore transparency followed. But of course, we have discussed on the Wire app as well as in successive stories on the Wire the fact that how the government went out on a limb to protect anonymity. But Anjali, you want to tell us about this petition, why you have filed it, and the quid pro quo allegation between corruption between the central agencies and the government of the day?
Well, all of us know how electoral bonds really ensured that they opened the floodgates of unlimited anonymous funding to political parties. The lion's share of electoral bonds went to the ruling BJP, and this was one of the most regressive moves because what it really did was that even information that citizens had of money that was going in to the political parties through the banking channel, even that was taken away from citizens. I think apart from one or two political parties, the CPIM and probably CPI, I don't think there was any political party which said that we will not accept electoral bonds. The fear from the beginning has been that when big money comes into play, then corporates who are giving money are giving these two political funds to political parties to be able to make sure that they get favors from these parties when they come to power. And this was something that has been noted by the Supreme Court in its judgment as well. And when the data has come out, it's showing clear trends of how thousands of crores of rupees have been given to political parties. The political party at the center, of course, getting the major share for favors to get. So we are seeing that money has been given in the form of kickbacks, in the form of bribes, potentially, to get contracts. So, for example, the Megha electricals case, where 140 crore rupees worth of electoral bonds was given to the BJP, and they in turn got 14,000 crore rupees worth of contracts in Maharashtra from the BJP government. So these are the kinds of trends that are visible, and this is also something that has made people say that this is perhaps the largest scam in India, because what we're talking about is 16,500 crore rupees worth of bonds being transacted, but the quantum of contracts that have been given for against these bonds is in lakhs of crores. So we have cases where pharmaceutical companies are giving funds to political parties. For example, Zydus gave funds to the BJP, and the Bihar regulator said that there should be action taken against Zydus, but the factories were in Gujarat, where the BJP is ruling, and no regulatory action was taken against Zydus. And this is really playing havoc with people's lives. This is the kind of corruption that the figures are suggesting, the data is suggesting. Again, it's showing extortion, where the data is pointing towards cases where ED, CBI, IT department were conducting raids and doing investigations into certain companies. And just around that time, these companies are giving large sums through electoral bonds to the BJP, which is the party that is in effect controlling these organizations. There is also other kinds of corruption like money laundering, which seems to be happening because there are companies that are making huge losses, 1 lakh crore rupees worth of losses, and giving large sums through electoral bonds. So just raising the whole suspicion that they might be working as fronts for other companies and therefore being involved in money laundering. So money laundering, extortion, quid pro quo, kickbacks, corruption, bribes, all of this is looking very clear in the trends that are emerging in the data. And that is why Common Cause and CPIL have approached the Supreme Court to say that there must be an independent probe in this. An SIT must be set up, which is court monitored, because who's also going to investigate the investigators? If the ED, the CBI, and all of these are looking like they're complicit from the data that has come out, one can't expect them to do a fair probe. So it'll have to be, and that's what the petition is about, asking for a court-monitored SIT.
So Seema, as Anjali is mentioning, the fact that this is one of the biggest scams in perhaps in independent India, and this whole extortion, money laundering, all this was in the conversation even 2 months back. But now that the election is well and truly underway, it's fallen out of the campaign wheel. And this is why the BJP does talk about corruption, that the BJP Prime Minister Modi has gotten rid of corruption, which is the UPA regime. There's no mention of the electoral bonds, of course, by the BJP nor by any other political party. This is in sharp contrast to how the BJP came to power itself in 2014, when it made corruption the biggest plank, and the people of the country were so concerned about corruption. This time we are seeing that there's no conversation around it, and perhaps opposition has not been able to mobilize on this front. Why is there no conversation around it?
So again, coming back to the data you quoted about how media sets up narratives and conversations, if there were like even 3 days in a week, there was a 9 o'clock debate on when is Mr. Modi going to Manipur again? Has Mr. Modi gone to Manipur? There would be a conversation. If they spoke about electoral bonds, there would be a conversation. So I completely understand why the BJP is not talking about it. But because they are so hegemonic and dominant over the narrative, whether it's on social, whether it's on TV and in the newspapers, that they are managing to kind of keep it quiet. But I think what you've also gathered on the ground and other journalists have reported, that the whole business of washing machine, or the BJP's ability to kind of cleanse corrupt people who are then taken into the party, I think people are beginning to join the dots themselves. And if you go and listen to Vox Pops, which kind of randomly appear on even several Godi channels, big media as well, which they may not have wanting it to, people are kind of figuring it out. And the fact that there have been so many people who've party hopped and come in. So I think electoral bonds is like a terrible illness, but not being again fully diagnosed by the people, but its symptoms keep popping up. So a lot of all this about why big leaders have so many cases and then they walk and they're perfectly clean, they're sparkling, no dogs suddenly, is all part of what I think people are catching on. But yes, I think Indian people, voters, are deeply, deeply being deceived by media, whose job it is in any democracy to just give good information and to provide that framework. And yes, that is not happening, and that's a low. So I think it's also sort of say that why is the opposition not talking about it? I think a lot of opposition parties may be a little defensive because the majority have taken electoral bonds themselves. So they are worried about the conversation going south if they, talk about that. But I think more than that, even if they try and campaign, it is media's job to actually run with those issues and question people who have power, whoever that party may be. And that is clearly something not happening.
Since we're talking about the fact that this could possibly have an impact on elections, we don't know really. But second phase of polling is coming up on April 26th, when we will be seeing 89 seats across 21 states and union territories going to the polls. And with this phase, we will see elections finishing in Kerala, a key state where the BJP is trying to make inroads. Rajasthan, as well as half of Karnataka, 14 out of the 28 seats will also finish polling. Here, of course, the BJP, most of these seats, the BJP had won in 2019. About 55 seats out of these 89 seats, the BJP had won, and 18 were won by the Congress. But this time, questions are being raised that with the communal narrative that is being spun just before the second phase of the election, has something to do with the voter turnout in the first phase, which is lower than what was in 2019's first phase. So earlier, while the BJP was talking about its target of 400 seats, now it has gone back to its old kind of playbook of Hindu-Muslim communal narrative. So, Seema, how do you see this in this phase? The fact that these are traditional BJP seats where the BJP should feel comfortable, but with its strategy of going back to the communal issues, does it say something about the seats that are coming up for polls?
I think it does. And also, I think the BJP has been actually quite faithful to its objectives all the time. So it has fairly done this. So earlier it was called dog whistling, just about those issues that they're slightly worried about running an India Shining campaign, which was the kind of a campaign that the BJP was seeming to run a bit. So maybe they decided to go back to really time-tested fundamentals like this, which just speaks of how defensive they are. And I think also this whole 400 par rhetoric, which was completely harebrained, and I don't know where it was kind of spun from as a realistic one, may have been scaled back to 399 because of the Surat disaster. So that may be, one way, not disaster, but the kind of election where an election was not necessary, but we already have the first MP of the 18th Lok Sabha, and in ways that are so curious. So, this election clearly has a lot of sort of things to unveil, but this communal pitch led from the front by Mr. Modi with so many mistruths about other parties' manifestos is really, it appears tired. It appears from the old BJP playbook. But yes, it's there are no surprises here. But he's definitely doing a lot of propaganda for the Congress, no doubt, because Congress reports that they've been, their manifesto has been downloaded by lakhs because of Mr. Modi constantly bringing it up. So people are going to check, even if they're angry voters, they're going to check what it says. So so he may actually stop talking about the Congress manifesto very soon once he realizes this.
So inadvertently, he's perhaps
pushing the Congress.
By at least getting their manifesto to be read by people. But as Seema was mentioning, just for the benefit of our viewers, just to mention the fact that the MP from Surat has been elected unopposed because the signatures of the opponents were discarded and they were not in proper order. But interestingly, some of those people who were called in to put their signatures are set to join the BJP. That report is on the News Minute if you wish to read it, and a version of that is also on the Wire. You can go ahead to our website and read that. But Anjali, I want to come to you on this, that the fact that the voter turnout has been quite less in the phase 1 in comparison to 2019, where we saw record voter turnout. How important is the voter turnout in elections, would you say? We are seeing also a very bad heat wave across the country. So is it something to do with the weather, or is it the political weather, would you say?
Well, I do think that when there is a wave, so to speak, not a heat wave, but the kind of wave that we are made to believe,
like Mr. Shah said in 2014.
The kind of wave that we are made to believe that there would be people who would come out to vote in very large numbers. What perhaps the BJP is gathering is that from the numbers in the first round, that the wave is not quite as strong as they would have liked all of us to believe. I think all the real issues of unemployment, of inflation, debt, which Seema talked about, are very real issues. And, after 10 years of governance, these are issues where people do expect answers to. Unfortunately, we've not seen that happening. Even in the run-up to the elections, what we did see by way of inauguration of mandirs, etc., was very much a focus on religion, not so much on the real issues that are confronting people today. Also, I think the entire facade of a corruption-free India that is being delivered has been dented. Whether, it is true that electoral bonds have not sort of, reached as many people as they would have had the mainstream media played its role. But I think that a very large number of people today are really seeing that there is a lot of corruption. There is also this kind of hiding of corruption of candidates, winning candidates who then move over to the BJP. So there is a very deep perception amongst people that this is not, things are not as we are being made to believe that they are. So there is therefore perhaps some sort of, desperation, if one may call it, which might be sort of reflected in these very openly communal speeches that we are hearing before the coming phase of elections. And I think that where we started from, that it's now really in the Election Commission's court. We do need to see the institutions step up and not allow the entire narrative now to be swept by these kind of speeches, because if the ECI is not seen to be doing anything about it, there is nothing to stop leaders from making these kind of speeches and sort of, really kind of getting voters riled up on some of these issues. So, but I do believe that there has been a very open kind of shift, which was not there. So let's
on
see
voter turnouts, is one thing we need to be slightly careful, because the science there is quite imperfect. So, does a high voter turnout necessarily mean an anti-incumbency vote? So, or does a very low turnout mean? So, I think it could mean different things given the starting point, given exactly where it's really low, because we also know that in some parts of Bihar, it's very low. The highs have been recorded in parts of Northeast. Actually, even parts of Northeast have, like Arunachal, etc., have had very low turnouts, Manipur too. But Tamil Nadu has been very high. So it's actually quite difficult to immediately jump to conclusions about direction. But yes, voter enthusiasm being less should be a cause of concern. If people are less enthusiastic about politics, about choosing, about participating in festival of democracy, then I think people should be worried.
Right, we'll obviously keep a close eye on all these developments and how the voter turnout is going to be in the second phase. Key states will be wrapping up elections, as we mentioned earlier, Kerala, Rajasthan, as well as half of Karnataka. These are, of course, states where the BJP is looking to gain and is crucial for its 400-seat target if it wishes to cross that. But if we are talking about enthusiasm, Seema has been very enthusiastically wanting to speak about the Hardik Pandya, the cricketer who's been facing a lot of flack during the ongoing IPL, and there has been no lack of enthusiasm from fans who have been quite quick to jeer him in large crowds. So before we end, Seema, you want to tell us why you have been quite enthusiastic to...
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just like struck because, the only other place in India currently now where large crowds are gathering is the IPL. Large masses are gathering and they're not being paid to go there. They are kind of buying their way. They're doing their own little bond type tickets and getting in. So when these large crowds kind of tell us something about the mood, they tell us something about kind of maybe about public. So, I mean, I would like people to be interested in this whole Hardik Pandya phenomenon and how it's playing out. And these are sporting crowds of Bombay. Bombay crowds are meant to be very sporting. They booing him, no doubt, because maybe he comes from Gujarat Titans and he's now the captain of Mumbai Indians. But then he gets booed even in the Narendra Modi Stadium. And then there is this about him treating Rohit Sharma badly, like getting him to field on the corners, like what's going on? So I'm interested in this kind of large crowd behavior towards popular Indian cricketer who's part of the Indian cricket team. He was clearly popular. I mean, he's had his run-in with other kinds of controversies. So I would be like, in this, is there something this tells us about the Indian mood, about the Western Indian mood that we're missing? So I just have questions on this, but I'm like intrigued. Do you have a view on this?
No, I'm very happy to go with your view.
Because Sanjay Majrekar and Sunil Gavaskar also yelled at the crowd, which is unprecedented. They had to actually tell the crowd to, shut up because abusive language was being used. But, I think a couple of decent academics should go after this phenomenon and study it, Shravasti. Thank you.
All right, we'll just see if this kind of enthusiasm that we're seeing for the IPL and Hardik Pandya really translates into our voters when they go to vote in the second phase, and hopefully the turnout will be higher and Indians will be exercising their democratic right to choose their next representatives. Thank you so much, Seema and Anjali, for joining us on the Wire app, and I'll see you all next week.